Hey, good morning everybody. Britt here. Got my agronomy update for the week of June 3rd for Southern Idaho. Going to talk about what's going on with crops. So where I cover or where I work specifically is from about Twin Falls to Ashton, Idaho. And I've been all over the territory this week. And I will tell you, I didn't see one grain drill or one potato drill in the field. And that means to me that we're done planting grain and potatoes. So for the most part, the grain and potato crop is in the ground. We still have some guys planting corn. Still have a few guys, I think, that just finished touching up some sugar beet replants. So for the most part, a lot of our major crops are in the ground. And that's good because we are coming up on the summer solstice here. I think it's June 20th, just in a couple weeks. And that's when we have the peak period for sunlight, and the photo period is the longest to have sunshine for that crop. And that's really helpful because we're going to turn these crops into factories. We're building a factory right now. We want a big canopy, a healthy crop to grow those potatoes, to grow that grain. So some of the things that's been going on this week, some of the agronomy Q&A that I had opportunities to talk about with folks. Number one, volunteer potatoes keeps on coming up over and over and over. A lot of volunteer potatoes in Idaho this year. And some folks think that maybe is climate related, maybe it didn't get as cold as usual, and so you don't get some of the kill in those top couple inches of some of those tubers and pieces of tubers that are left. That could play into it. But I would tell you too, what I historically have seen is that when we have a pretty good crop, and last year in 23 was a pretty good crop, when we have a big crop, we just tend to have more small, undersized potatoes in the field. And so it's a volume deal. And so when we have more small, undersized potatoes in the field, we just see them pushing the next year. But I did have an agronomist tell me the other day that he had a field that had actually volunteer spuds from 2 years ago coming up. So not sure what's going on there, but we have a lot of volunteer potatoes. A couple key conversations. Number one, the phone call comes in, what's my best option for volunteer potatoes and sugar beets? Well, your best option there is Stinger from Corteva Agriscience. Stinger is a product that's very systemic. It moves systemically in those volunteer potatoes, gets to the root and can kill them, or to the tuber and can kill them very well. And we want to control these volunteer potatoes because they actually can spread diseases for this year's crop. There's a lot of different diseases they can host. Number one, what we're worried about is PVY disease, and aphids can move that PVY disease from the volunteer spud across the street to the crop that's on the other side of the street. And so that's a big concern, and we want to kill those volunteer spuds because of that. But then also these volunteer potatoes or spuds can also host diseases too. And if they're not treated because they're in a crop that's not getting taken care of for potato diseases, they can really be a susceptible host and kind of help harbor that disease for this year's crop and maybe even over winter for next year's crop as well. Those are the couple key things. Stinger and sugar beets is your best option for controlling volunteer spuds. Volunteer spuds in corn, couple different options there. Stinger is labeled for applications in corn. So if you're a Roundup Ready corn guy, or if you're conventional corn, you can treat your traditional herbicide that you're using or whatever your program may be. You can apply that Stinger at the same time and get excellent control of those volunteer spuds. But you have to be aware of label language that talks about crop rotations, because Stinger does have a longer crop rotation interval on some key crops. So you want to pay attention to the label and check that out. If that is a concern, if rotation is a concern after this corn, starring is also an option. We have a couple different options. I have starring NXT, which is starring plus bromoxynil, and I have just straight starring ultra, of course, too. And then we actually have a product called Wide Match that's starring and Stinger in the same jug. And that's a really great product and a great fit for grain, but it also can be a fit for corn in some situations. So consult with your agronomist if you're a farmer, read your label, or reach out to me and I'll get you dialed in on those products in particular. Next key questions that I got this week, or the biggest questions I got, was adjuvant selection in grain herbicides. A lot of grain is getting treated right now for weeds. We want that crop to be healthy and strong, and we have a lot of things going in the tank sometimes. So tankmix, options are very wide and very diverse, and it can get a little crazy sometimes because you might have an application going out with 5 to 6, 7 products. And you might have insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, all of those things in the field, plus foliar nutrients, plus adjuvants. There's a lot of different options there. We need to be aware of that, especially in spring grain crops like spring barley and spring wheat. They tend to be more sensitive than a winter crop, and their leaves are newer and fresher, and it's growing fast. And so we really want to be aware of what we're putting in the tank and how we're using it. Some of these products we're using have an adjuvant package in them, and they don't need additional adjuvant. But on the other hand, in the case of Open Sky for wheat, one of my products, we need an adjuvant package in the tank. But we also have label language where if you're putting on certain products, you can probably back that down. And that's all about taking care of that crop and avoiding that crop response or crop flash that we can get sometimes when we have multiple products in the tank. So those are some of the questions on grain. And then the other question I had coming up repeatedly this week was in potatoes. Matrix is one of the Corteva products I represent. It's used in potatoes for taking care of tough to control weeds like kochia, lamb's quarter, pigweed, nightshade, some of those things that are really drivers in crop production and agronomy. And when we're using Matrix in potatoes, an adjuvant selection is very important. And we have a couple key recommendations we usually call out. Number one is we really prefer an MSO type adjuvant. That stands for methylated seed oil. Those methylated seed oils are highly refined oils that make that product penetrate those weed leaves a lot better and get that product into that weed to get you better control and get it quicker. So 1% methylated seed oil is kind of our standard recommendation, but reach out to me if you have specifics. We also like a nitrogen source with Matrix. And there's a lot of different options, everything from UN32 to using ammonium sulfate and melting it down and putting that in the mix, or to even, packaged good types products from manufacturers that have their own line of adjuvants. All those can be good options, but they're all a little different in rates and things like that. So I don't want to talk about rates and timings on those because they're very specific, but reach out to me if you need some information on that or talk to your agronomist. Adjuvant selection with Matrix is very, very critical in potatoes because there's a few we want to watch out for. Think about potatoes like metribuzin. That's a standard herbicide in potatoes. If we put Matrix, metribuzin, and an oil on, that is a very hot recommendation. It's spicy. We can get that crop to show some crop response sometimes, which we're not really looking for. So a lot of the times if metribuzin is going on with Matrix, we'll actually back out the methylated seed oil and we'll apply a non-ionic surfactant in that situation to kind of safeten that mix up for the crop. So a lot of things like that happen with tank mixes. Very complicated thing that we're doing there when we're trying to manage these crops and steward these crops for better health and to grow great. But we do have a lot of experience. Your agronomist has experience. A lot of growers have experience, your neighbors. And of course, I have an experience that spans a couple decades I can help you with as well. And I can reach out to folks when you don't know the answer because nobody knows all the answers. And being able to admit that is the first step in being somebody that can find the answer. So have a good one. Be safe.